Welcome to Facing the Moment, brought to you by the Foundation for Self-Leadership. In these episodes, we will address various crises and focus on how to navigate them with abundant fortitude and a bit of hope. As we discuss relevant observations together, we will identify meaningful actions that will generate valuable insights. You can download all episodes on Apple Music, Spotify, and YouTube.
I welcome our listeners to this new episode of Facing the Moment. Today, we have a conversation around the effects of combat for military veterans and their families. For most military veterans, emotional challenges do not start when they get deployed. Complying with orders to join a combat mission or take part in an operation at a location that may be dangerous or life-threatening. Nor does the war end for them when they return home. Military service members often bring back home with them patterns of survival that kept them vigilant and alive in times of combat. Not to mention, some of them unfortunately bring back major physical injuries. When they get back, service members extend their ways of thinking, reacting, being fully guarded, feeling protected by their teams, and even the way they numbed their pain into the next phase of their life or career in their generally warless home environments. For some, anger flares without warning at times. Deep sleep becomes often disrupted and unreachable. Distraction and numbness keep relatives or former friends at bay. Many struggle with heavy alcohol or substance use to extinguish the pain. Relationships get broken at times. Economic hardships may ensue. There could be skirmishes with the law. Some experience suicidal ideations and heartbreakingly choose suicide to get relief. 3 every 2 days in 2023 in the US, the leading cause of death among military veterans, 1 being one too many. According to VA data and a study of veterans facing depression or anxiety in the US, 23% seek counseling and around 26% take psychotropic medications as part of their treatment. And this is more global an issue than national. Support that they receive may not be adequate or readily accessible or wanted at first. Yet, there is hope. Healing and building wholeness post-combat are possible. In this episode, we explore what can happen if the right conditions are being met, namely being met with understanding or a structure or a community or shifting one's perspective and doing deep inner work. In rare cases, even this is not the final solution. There's no panacea, and we're not after radical transformation. Instead, we're looking for steady gains and tangible steps toward a more comforting sense of normalcy. What are such conditions and what is possible? To help me explore this challenging question, I'm grateful and privileged to be joined by Beau Laviolette, LCSW, who has been doing significant work to help military veterans get on a path of hope and healing. Beau is a former US Marine as well. Thank you for your intention and engagement then and for what you are doing now, Beau. Glad you could join me.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Thank you, Tufik.
Thank you. Beau Laviolette is a therapist who has devoted his private practice to clients from among the military veteran community. Beau has been trained in various psychotherapeutic modalities, IFS and EMDR among them. Beyond his own practice, Beau started a few years ago a program that brings IFS and nature to veterans during long weekend retreats, with an integrated program that engages them before and after the experience and invites them to be involved in later retreats to help others. This effort was inspired by earlier work developed by Ray Mount, PhD. Thank you, Ray. The foundation has been privileged to support 3 of Beau's retreats, 2 for military veterans and 1 for therapists of veterans. And here is a development we at the foundation are extremely pleased and proud to see happen. Beau has recently launched a nonprofit committed to this mission, I'm sure he'll tell us more about it in this conversation. So back to you, Beau. What else would you like to add about yourself that would be relevant to our conversation today?
Yeah. So Tufik, thank you so much for having me. I think you said it all. I'm a Marine veteran, licensed therapist, and recently in private practice until I launched my nonprofit called Healing Protectors, which I'm gonna get into more about that. Live in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I'm the married wife, two boys, who I'm trying to get into nature more. So I love my work. I love what I do, and it's good to be here with you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being here with me. Thank you for your service, for your sacrifice, for everything you do to promote and foster healing and well-being, especially among the veteran community. So listeners, let's face the moment together. And let me please state at the outset that if you, our listeners, get upset by anything you hear or anything that brings back uneasy memories or triggers you in any way emotionally, please step away from the podcast. Take a few deep breaths and remind yourself that you have what it takes to regain your balance and composure. You can always come back and listen later. Also, I must add here, lest we get misunderstood, that we are not condoning, nor am I okay with war scenarios. It is the people who engage and their well-being during and after that I'm most concerned about. So, Beau, you've worked with numerous veterans over the years. What first drew you to the work?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that drew me was being a veteran. Obviously, serving in the Marine Corps just made sense that I would focus on this. But what drew me into the work actually goes back to February 24, 2005. I really struggled when I got out of the Marine Corps. Struggled with addiction, alcohol, all that. And I remember going back to my mom's house because I lost everything. And I was at the door. She met me at the door and she said I couldn't go back home because she was enabling me. She learned that she was enabling me and she told me I needed to get help. And I looked at her and I was angry and I said, you don't know what it's like to be an alcoholic like me or to struggle. And she looked at me and she says, Beau, you don't know what it's like to live with one. and I knew right there, if you burn the bridge with mom, you got to go. You really do have to get help. So I actually, they told me they had a VA program in New Orleans. And I went through that. I went through the VA program. I got sober, stayed sober, been sober ever since. And at some point, somebody said they thought it would be good at helping people. And so I just, okay, I'll follow the journey. I'll follow the footsteps and eventually went to Tulane, got my degree in math, social work, and started doing this work based on my experience in life and my personal story. It just felt like a good step.
Well, thank you for sharing and congratulations on being where you are today. And I'm sure this was a very challenging series of moments. It's wonderful to see someone like you go through it to the other side and now be a model for others and bring those lessons learned and those experiences and the empathy, which no doubt you've developed over the years, sharing those with your clients. Sure. So when your veteran client walks into your office, what are the general experiences that they seem to carry that others may not be able to see or notice?
Well, that's a good question, and I'm sure there's 1,000 answers. The first one that comes to mind just from my gut is what we don't see, and there was a research study that basically said 80% of people who join the military have complex trauma, which is childhood trauma. And one of my guys looked at me and he said, yeah, and the other 20% are lying. So, there's so many people that carry burdens that we just never look at. I'm going to talk about that more, about what we do with those and how the military can actually reinforce these aspects of us. But I kind of at some point started looking at that. When I see a veteran and I see this adult male or female that's struggling with all these symptoms, I tend to go back in time and I say, when did these things originate from? And I don't think we think about that. I don't think we even know that. We don't even consider that, especially with the military, because we're so focused on combat. But my job is to unpack the whole story, not just part of the story.
Nicely said. Yes. I assume that being in the military gives service members structure, purpose, and a sense of belonging, right? There's community there. People have your back that many probably find appealing when they engage and sign up and deploy.
Mm-hmm.
But I also I'm guessing that when they step away from that, they lose some of that anchoring experience. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, totally. That's a good question. That's probably the two things that is needed, and I think that the military provides, and we tend to lose that, which is the structure. Let's talk about that first. The structure that comes with the military. In a way, there's also this. We can focus on our job because a lot of things are taken care for us. Our place to live and everything basically. So there's a lot more structure with that actually going into the military, some of us join the military because of that. We're looking for structure. We're looking for purpose. And ultimately, we're looking for sometimes a family, sometimes a community that we can connect with. So, as I said earlier, when we think about what we have or don't have when we go into the military, sometimes those two things are needed. So we get that in the military, although we go through very hard experiences. I think it's the structure and community that keeps us going. And then when we get out, we lose some of that. I remember telling my buddies, I promise I'll stay in touch with you. We'll stay in touch. And it's just so many times we don't do that. We don't stay in touch with the community that we once had. So when we come back into civilian life, I think some of those walls break down, right? We try to have structure in our life, and sometimes other people have a hard time with our structure, in personal relationships or jobs, because maybe they don't have that, or they don't think of that, or maybe they can see it as us being too much of that. And I think when we lose that, I think we lose something inside ourselves, which is why I push for more than anything community among veterans, not just therapy, but also we need to have a healthy community with people that are trying to do being better, the best versions of ourselves.
Yeah. I may have told you that before, that I spent my teenage years as a bystander, let's say, in an active civil war zone. But I cannot imagine, it's hard for me to imagine an individual actively engage in combat, right? I mean, we've seen it and heard and read about it, over the years through a number of different theaters, combat theaters around the world. I'm just curious about what you've learned as a therapist from your clients and from your own experience about the predominant emotions or thoughts that are mostly front and center and can become all-consuming when someone is actively engaged in a war zone.
Yeah, well, I go back to something I learned from one of my clients who was Marine Afghanistan, and he just experienced so much. And I remember him telling me, I was like, what was that experience like? What did you need in that moment to survive and to, stay focused on the mission? And I remember what he said. He said, when I was in a combat situation, I've never felt more present in that situation than I've had in anything else I've ever done in life. You can't really think about anything else. You can't think about your wife or your husband or your kids or your friends back home, because if you do that, it's real easy to get distracted and people can die. People can the mission can get, you can't accomplish what you're there to accomplish. So he said you really have to be able to do something that in psychology we call that suppression. We take certain things, and I'll talk about that a lot in this episode, but we take things and we sort of suppress it. We can't afford to think about it. We can't afford to have feelings or to think thoughts. We have to stay focused. Unfortunately, we never take those things out and deal with it. We keep it in the closet. But that's probably there's so much to that question. But if I had to pick one thing, I'll never forget when you told me that. Just being able to stay present, it was important. People that couldn't do that, bad things could happen. And so our brain learns how to sort of exile those things and push it away.
Yeah, like a sense of hyper-vigilance that my whole capacity, emotional, mental, physical, is so aligned on one thing, survival and accomplishing the mission as I'm told, as I'm commanded to do.
Yes.
And I cannot help but think that in some cases there is something I think they call in the industry moral injury, when you feel that you have to do something that you might not otherwise have complied with. Where does this come in, and does it have an effect beyond the period of combat?
Yeah, sure. And my thoughts about that is what you said. It's where obviously we do something or don't do something that goes against our moral values, which is what moral injury is. And like having to kill someone, or doing something against what we normally would believe. There's a huge expert in the EMDR world, Eva Usadi. She has a magnificent veterans program in New York. And she's the kind of leading person in this moral injury. And something she taught me about that is that the amount of guilt and shame that gets attached to that with moral injury, because it's something that really did happen. It's something that we experienced, or something we failed to do. And I feel like for moral injury, when you look at moral injury and PTSD, they are different, right? They are a little different. In my experience, working with moral injuries it goes a lot deeper. Mm-hmm. It goes a lot deeper, and it's hard to navigate, because we have these strong parts of us that hold so much guilt and shame around that sometimes we can't forgive ourselves for doing or not doing the things that we could have done.
Let's talk a bit about post-deployment.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, you've talked about suppression, and that remained turned off, right? The ability to access those feelings or emotions, even the pain of it all, maybe the vulnerability, I'm guessing, stays off, right? They turned it off, and they either chose or forgot to turn it on. And I realize that experiences vary widely among individuals, and so does how different individuals respond to them. But I'm looking here to understand maybe the impact, if there is such a pattern that you have experienced and learned from your clients. So what can you say about what happens post-deployment when they come back home with these suppressed feelings, emotions, awarenesses?
Yeah, good question. Well, there's a law of gravity. What goes up must come down, but there's a law of emotion. What goes down must come back up. Right. And so what we push down eventually comes back up. And so when those things that we put in the closet or we suppress shows up again, because it definitely will. We do a really good job, I think, or we try to make sure that we manage that, to make sure that sort of stays at bay. But what happens is, because of what we talked about earlier, maybe lack of structure, lack of community or relationships, things open that up and it comes back up. And so we look for ways to push that down again. Right. And so, especially what I see in therapy is that, sometimes we don't look at what's the core underneath. We're only looking at the symptoms. And so the way it shows up is through substance use and alcohol and anger. Anger is a control emotion. It covers that up. We see it in acting out sexually, pornography, eating, even what could be seen as healthy behaviors like working. We can overwork and distract ourselves. And so that pushes it down for a little bit, but again, it keeps coming up until we deal with it. So that's kind of what I see when people come back home. They don't have a way um, to they don't know how to deal with that, or they don't have a way, or they don't want to, or they're afraid. And so it shows up in those symptoms, which affects their immediate relationships, the relationship with their spouse and their kids, and that's just a domino effect of that whole scenario of managing it and reacting to the trauma.
Sure, understood. Understood. You mentioned afraid. I'd love for you to share more about that fear, because this doesn't only apply to veterans, it applies to old folks who have resorted to activities to extinguish some pain that they have. What is the fear usually for keeping things suppressed, for engaging in these activities that keep things suppressed so they won't have to deal with them? You know, we know generally it's some pain of sorts, but what can you say about that? Could you share a bit more so we can understand better what are they afraid of?
Gosh, yeah, I think well, you're kind of answering the question there. I think, yeah, obviously the pain, they're usually afraid. I've seen some common fears associated with, I don't know if I want to open up that closet. And yeah, number one is the pain. And so it's okay, what's so bad about the pain? Well, it's going to be overwhelming. You know, they really are afraid it's going to be something they will not be able to turn off or put back. There's so much in the kettle, you know, and it's just gonna blow up, and then that has a trickle effect, because then the other fears come in about, yeah, you know, I'm doing a good job at managing this, but the last time I tried opening up that closet, things got really bad. I thought I got depressed. I started thinking about drinking again, even suicide, something as, you know, the ultimate firefighter we have inside of us that puts those fires out. So I think there's a multitude of things. It's just the fear of the pain, the fear of the destruction that could come from opening that pain up.
So where do you start? Because clearly that fear has to be addressed, and there's no preparation for how one faces the fear. We just have to face it. You know, we just have to face that pain. Like they faced the theater of war, now they have to face the theater of inner war, if you wish, right?
Mhm.
Inner combat. You know, because that will be the first step to understanding and to be able to navigate toward more calm within. But where do you start? Give us a sense of, you know, what would a veteran have to do to start preparing to face that pain?
Yeah, I like the way you put it too. The internal battle within us, and we faced it out here, but now we have to go inside and face it. And um, gosh, I've seen, you know, I always tell people, you know, people would tell me if joining the Marine Corps was took a lot of courage, and I said, yeah, it did, but doing your own work, personal work, it takes, gosh, the same or if not more courage. So I that's where I start, actually, to acknowledge that and honor that you have been working so hard to keep things at bay, to manage your life from day one of you being on this earth to the military, to your experiences. And so, you know, I want people to know that you don't have to do anything yet. Just the fact that you're even listening to this podcast, just the fact that you are thinking about doing something to help yourself, I think is half the battle. So I usually acknowledge people when they come into my office. You've won. You know, you entered the door. You've done something that most people are afraid to do. So I think just giving ourselves grace and credit around that. Um, and then from there, you know, I acknowledge all those protective things that we do. You know, the fear. We have parts of us that are trying to just help us and protect us. And I don't want to overlook that. It's like these are the gatekeepers, these are the guards that have been guarding the castle, if you will, and to pretend that they're not there is, because I think we do that sometimes. We pretend we're not afraid because being afraid is not, it's something that we don't normally do because of what that means. I changed the narrative a little bit and say, well, actually, let's invite that and be, you know, grateful for those parts for doing what they've been doing.
Well, I like what you said because I feel that we live in a society where fear, and I do not want to talk gender here, but let's just say among men in particular, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sadness, fear, showing expression of those is not looked upon favorably, which is sad because we cannot be a total human and behave like a like a total human being without that broad range of emotions that we experience. Of course, there are behaviors that are not acceptable that we need to be aware of, and often the emotion translates unconsciously into behavior. But if we're conscious, we have a way to express these feelings, and I believe that it could be a release at times.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned PTSD and moral injury, and all I can think of is the T in PTSD, trauma, right? Traumatic events that happen, and there are probably a multitude of those that start when someone joins the military, during deployment, post-deployment. So how do you navigate this traumatic journey? Because the goal, if I understand it correctly, is to help them bring it to the present and put it to bed finally, right? The event cannot be erased, but the effects of the event could be managed, let's say, better, right? Placed in context, in perspective better. They might not cause the same pain they caused then. What do you do in your therapy session without going deep, perhaps, into the modalities that you use to understand those, to bring them to the fore, to help the client navigate them?
Well, there's a question I ask myself first, and it's this: it's not what's wrong with you, but it's what happened to you. And so when somebody's presenting with something like you said, the behaviors or those reactions that we have that go with PTSD, my question is where does this come from? And as I said earlier at the beginning, we have 18 years of our life before the military. If you join at 18, that you started to actually do some of these things. What I've noticed with the veterans that I work with, anybody really, is that if we keep going back in time, these behaviors like fear and anger and all these things that we do started way before the military, right? And what happens, I think the military just sort of reinforces it because maybe we need to do that or it's part of the culture. I think you brought up a good point about, again, not to put things in categories, but how most women maybe respond to the pain and men respond to the pain, and how we've learned and now we're part of a culture that sort of says this is okay. And so part of it is just the number one is just being aware of that and where it's coming from. And again, I think in therapy, what I'm trying to help people do is have more. I think when we have more clarity about why we do the things we do and where they come from, it brings up more positive energy. It works. There's something that resonates with us. And although it's hard to do this sometimes, but I think our beliefs need to change. It's part of like being aware, but also what are we going to do with these beliefs that we have about certain things in life, and helping people explore those beliefs and maybe even change those beliefs that's not being helpful anymore to them.
Yeah, yeah. I'd like to talk a bit about relationships and the effect of these experiences on relationships, especially after returning home. Friends, family, colleagues, neighbors, people we play sports with or engage in social clubs with. What have you learned from your veterans about these situations, and what has worked for them through your therapy experience that allowed them to navigate those relationships better?
Yeah. Well, that is it. That's actually the main thing at the end of the day. It's the relationships that are getting affected, that are being affected. That's in a way that's sometimes why people come to therapy, is because they're having a relationship problem with something. And so I think and there's different reasons for that. There's different reasons. Maybe the person that they're in the relationship with doesn't quite understand why they're doing what they're doing. They don't understand, and all they see is some of the effects of it that's causing a lot of pain, actually, a lot of harm. So rightfully so, it's hard to deal with someone who's very angry and doing things or drinking or doing drugs. Um, but what I do to help veterans to work better with relationships is I talk about the relationship you have with yourself. And I do something that's called an about face. An about face is wherever your attention is, an about face is turning around and looking in the opposite direction. And so in IFS, the type of therapy I do, we call that a U-turn. So obviously I work with veterans, so it just seems like an about face seems to be a perfect term for that. But it's about not really looking at what's outside of you, but it's about what is the relationship you have with yourself and these different aspects of yourself. And I think when we can do that, that's the best place to start. It's not outside, it's inside. And I have found in my experience that when people have a better relationship with themselves, they seem to have a better relationship with other people.
Yeah, you mentioned IFS, and I would love to hear from you, having applied it extensively with military veterans. What are 2, 3, or 4 constructs or notions about this modality that they have resonated with, that really opened the door for them? Because clearly when they come into you, maybe they have some trust because you understand the experience, having been a former Marine, and that already lowers the heat a little bit. But there's always this skepticism about inner work, generally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
What do they resonate with? Because I know IFS is not a series of recipes, but really an engagement with oneself, like you said, with one's own aspects. What have they resonated with generally?
Yeah. I'm just thinking about a comment somebody made about he's been in therapy and tried every single modality you could think of, and I'm sure each has been helpful in their own way. But he said something about IFS. He said even the EMDR, which I'm sure we'll talk about, that I do, and the other therapies, that he said, there's something different about IFS. And this is what he said. He said IFS is not a therapy. He said it's a way of being. Right? It's a way of thinking. It's a way of being and viewing the world, myself, my relationships. So I think first and foremost, that has been a big indicator that this is something here. It's actually changing the way people experience things and see things, think about things. IFS, in short, is basically it's a way of seeing how our personality is the parts of our personality that changes as a result of some experience, whether that's childhood or military combat or whatever, and how these different aspects of us take on pain and manage the pain and react to the pain when it gets triggered. And so I think first and foremost, they appreciate the way they can look at themselves and how, number one, these different things that we're doing, it's not who we are. It's just a part of who we are. IFS talks about parts a lot. You'll hear that a lot. There's parts of us that do this. And so it's, in a way, it's sort of freeing to know this is not who I am. This depression, this anxiety, this anger is not who I am. It's just a part of who I am. And IFS has a way to explore these different aspects in a way that makes sense and in a way that gives us a little bit more compassion for ourselves, which again goes back to what we need to have in order to function and have better relationships. And I think lastly, I'll say this: there's something in IFS called the self-energy. And when I talk to the veterans, I usually use that term, and there's 8 qualities that go with that. And sometimes I'll call that our true north. Everybody has a true north inside of them, that no matter how off course they get, they have something in them that they can tap into. I heard a story about this eagle, baby eagles, when they leave the nest. Um, they fly, and they have something inside their brain that throbs when they get off course, that their nest aligns with the North Pole. And every time they get off course, they have this throbbing experience. And so they know to turn left or to turn right. The more in line they get, the less pain they have. And that's exactly how I see IFS. When we get off course in life, we have this throbbing. Those are called parts, is the anxiety, depression, anger. And IFS has a way, this inner compass that we know to turn. And the more aligned we are with our purpose and our goals, those parts seem to subside a little bit in a good way. And it puts us back on track.
Yeah. So when they become extreme and when they take control of us, they don't serve us. But if we give them some sense of wholesome engagement, they might become assets for us rather than liabilities. And I like what you mentioned about the self-energy, because it refers to that capacity which we have inherently in us to heal, to develop in a holistic fashion, to, like you said earlier, to become a better or the best version of ourselves. But it's often covered up by the rubble of life, right? By the traumas of life, by the pain that we carry, so we can't access it. And I'm sure it has 8 predominant qualities, and probably many more qualities than just 8. But the model, it seems, kind of simplifies it a little bit and describes that ability of the human psyche to heal. And I think this is, from my read of it and my experience of it, this is where hope lies. Because if the client, if the veteran has no hope of healing, they're not going to heal, right? So step 1 is to be able to gain that belief. And you mentioned beliefs earlier. I would very much like for you to share with me what generally are the beliefs that have been problematic for the veteran, the combat veteran, and how they need to change them in order for them to be on the path to healing.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, you say a few words about
that's really, really, really good. And you said something about the self-energy and the healing, and that was really good the way you put that. I think in terms of the beliefs that again they come in with, even as far back as childhood, we have certain beliefs about things that tend to not work for us anymore. And I could probably answer that question with, gosh, there's so many beliefs that people come in with. I think the first one is probably like what we talked about earlier, like, what does it mean? And I'll ask people that, what does it mean to be sitting in front of me right now? And what are your beliefs about that? And what is your motivation for being here? And, when somebody responds with, I think this is weird, or I think this is, if I'm a man, I'm not supposed to talk about my feelings. And, I tend to look at those beliefs first, because it doesn't matter how much I want to get to the trauma, to the memories, to the healing. If we're talking about healing, I think we have to look at those beliefs first, because I see those as blocking. They're called, actually in therapy, we call them blocking beliefs. These are beliefs that people have. And what you said about hope is right on. That's actually a blocking belief. I kind of look at it as a part, but it's a blocking belief that we have. Like, I don't think I'm going to get better. And I ask them, how much do you believe that? And if it's 100%, then we got to start there, because that's gonna influence everything else. You said something earlier reminded me about depression. I did some research on this, and they have found that when people are at the bottom, when people are depressed, they have 2 things in common. Every single person they looked at, and number one, was the thing about hope. They didn't have any hope in that moment. They couldn't see a light at the end of the tunnel. And the second thing I saw was that they thought they were the only ones going through that problem. And they didn't know, they didn't think about, like, no one else could understand me. So, usually, and that's maybe their experience or maybe their beliefs about it. But again, I'm always pushing to find out what are your beliefs about even doing this work. And I think that's the place we have to start.
So let's stay on this a little bit and see if you can take us a bit deeper, Beau, because I'm curious to learn about your understanding of what actually shifts inside a person when healing starts to take place.
Yeah, so I think the first thing that I believe shifts inside of a person when healing starts to take place is there's as I said earlier, there's a different way we're talking to ourselves. So when I listen for that, like what are the things that you're saying, which actually come from our beliefs, right? Our beliefs kind of push that. And so I think the first thing I see is that people start to see themselves in a different light. Right. Um, there was a study, it looked at mood in the immune system, and they found people that were experiencing negative emotions, their immune system had improved. And didn't make any sense at all. So they kept studying them, and they found two groups. They both experienced negative emotions. One, their immune system improved, and the other one went down. And they found the ones where the immune system did not improve, they all felt that they should not be feeling the negative emotions. So there was this internal conflict. Whereas the people that improved, they accepted what they were feeling in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think what I see shift is that people are coming to terms with things, but not in a way to just lie down and play dead kind of thing. It's this is what I went through. This is my experience, and I can accept that. But now I can do something about that. So I think the first thing I see when healing starts to take place is the way we talk to ourselves. The second thing I see is also how we talk to other people, basically how we respond to other people, right? We have this wider window of tolerance, if you will, with different situations where, and I'll hear this a lot, what used to bother me doesn't bother me anymore or as much. And oftentimes, 99% of the time, people can't pinpoint it. They can't tell you when it happened. They can't even explain it. They can't even put it into words. They just know that this thing that I used to punch a hole in the wall about, I don't do anymore. This thing where I used to yell at my kids and because they would push that button, it doesn't push that button anymore.
Mm. Yeah. And clearly healing is not a one-time event. It's an ongoing process, right? And I'd like to add one more thing to what you said. As you're saying, it just occurred to me that maybe healing also starts shifting, and I know it from my own experience, when I recognize that those emotions I'm experiencing may be called negative, but they're really there to serve me, and I'm not aware of that. So I will stop judging them as negative, right? Like you said, instead of pushing them away, I follow their path. I try to explore why they're there with some compassion, because maybe if I believe that they're there to serve me and they don't know how to do it, so to speak, if we can use language like that, they might start shifting their, and loosening their grip on me, allowing me to grow that compassion a little bit and have the courage to explore further. That's my experience, for me, and working with some clients in my coaching practice. Mm-hmm. But I want you to say a few words about you in the therapy chair, Beau, because you engage with clients who are dealing with the lingering effects of trauma all the time, and this is not an easy thing. And they might be sharing with you imagery and stories that could also be activating for you. How do you stay centered, grounded, caring, compassionate, yet present with them, listening to every word they say, quieting your conversations inside your own mind so that they can explore with you effectively and start healing? What do you do for yourself in that process?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And it's such an important question because I think every therapist Every coach, needs a coach. Every therapist needs a therapist. And it's like, so what I do, it's not only what I do in the session, but what I do outside the session to help me uh, deal with the burdens that, it's sort of like a vicarious trauma thing. It's like I'm seeing these things with him. I'm experiencing these things with him, and so I do a number of things. I think talking to somebody, doing my own work. I usually see therapists come to sessions with two things: their story and their education. You know, um, we have our story. I'm whatever. I'm 46 years old or 47, I think. I forgot. I was born in 1979, whatever that is, in October. Does it get better as age? Do I forget my age as I get older? Is that gonna happen?
Yes.
Okay, good to know. I don't feel bad. So, I have 47 years of life that's showing up in the session. My own guilt, my own experiences in the Marine Corps, and my own experiences in childhood. And so I got to deal with that. And I come to therapy with all those wonderful modalities that help people, but sometimes people don't need that. Sometimes they just need my presence. They need somebody who's not going to judge them. I always tell people, create an atmosphere where people don't feel judged, and they'll tell you anything, And so, I think doing my work, I do a couple of things. In addition to talking to someone, I work out. I think exercise is important. Fortunately, I'm able to do that. Diet. I go into, this is real crazy. I go into the woods for 3 days, once a quarter. I don't eat anything. I fast. I bring something usually spiritual to read, and I get reconnected with God and myself and nature. And so I do things almost on a daily basis to help me, show up as my best versions in the session. And then even in the session, though, when you mentioned those parts of me come out, I have a way to deal with that and to work with that. So again, I think it's so important for me to be attuned to someone and to stay present. I heard this story about Mother Teresa, and she said everybody who experienced being with her, they've never felt anybody you were the most important person in her life in that moment. There was nobody else, even if there was stuff all around her, she was 100% present with you. And I try to be like that. And I told my wife that, and she says, "You are not Mother Teresa." I'm just saying we should have goals in our life.
Well, this is a beautiful aspiration, actually. Just the fact that you aspire to be is probably half the journey. So good for you. And I'm sure your clients and your veteran colleagues are very thankful for that. You mentioned nature. So I'd like to give you an opportunity to talk about that. You launched that formal IFS and nature retreat program that I mentioned earlier. And now it's a nonprofit dedicated for that purpose. Very promising and very inspiring, Beau. So thank you for that determination and the vision that you bring in. Tell us how this started and why nature, and what is the value added aspect here?
Gosh, yeah, I love talking about this, and I'll say why this started is because of you. I'm sure you're people can't see you, but you're putting your hands up like, no, don't, give me credit or anything. But I have to say, it is. I remember that call. I reached out. I got trained in IFS. I found you, the foundation, and I saw that y'all were doing this initiative to bring IFS to veterans, and so perfect, made sense. So you connected me with Ray Mount, who invited me to Boston to do a nature retreat. For us, it was us and a group of therapists. Now I'm from. It was November. You're right, and we were sleeping in tents. I'm from Louisiana. I think people from Boston would probably say that's still nuts, right? I mean, we're in tents. It's November. It's the coldest I've ever been. And so I said, if I could do this in Boston, I can do this anywhere. So I left Boston and I came back to Louisiana, and I started doing these retreats. Why nature is because I can answer that in so many ways, but I think just to keep it simple, nature is there's something healing about that energy. I've had veterans tell me that too. They've said, it's like almost like nature's a co-therapist, Nature is a co-parent. It's something that is a nurturing atmosphere, but also strong atmosphere that can give us the things that we need. And I've had veterans tell me that I could never do this in an office. The fluorescent lights, the way the room is, and all these things. There's just something about nature that acts as this container for us to even do the work. So I think all these things we're talking about, the modalities, the trust, the relationship, the presence, the attunement, all these things that's neat, those are in the moment. But I think we have to look at, well, what's the container that's holding this moment? What's the atmosphere? And nature has so many aspects to it that not only helps us feel safe, but it also could bring up parts of us that give us an opportunity we can look at. We can do that about face.
Well, thank you for that. And as you're speaking, I just thought of something else about nature, especially for combat veterans. Their training is not indoors. Some of it is, but their training is outdoor. Their deployment is not indoor, it's outdoor. So it's like, we inherited the pain outdoor. We're going to go outdoor to reconnect and release it into nature. I don't know, maybe I'm being too poetic, but that seems to me like a nice, a symbolic way of bringing them back home, so to speak. So what do you think, in their words, as they share with you in the retreats? Because I remember you telling me at some point you do a bonfire at the end, which is like a way to build community, to put their pains in the fire, to see it, crackle and kind of dissipate into the ether. Share with me what they say, how they've responded to the IFS element that you bring, the guidance, the nature, the community that they build. Share with us from their vantage point, because I know you've taken a lot of surveys and focus group conversations to help you understand their response.
Yeah, that's really good to reflect on. And as you're saying this, I'm just thinking about the very first thing that I hear, because everybody has a different experience, and I've created these retreats to meet people where they are. You can be first time in therapy, never talked about your feelings, and you could be an experienced, seasoned person who's been in therapy before. It just is designed to meet you where you are. So people have different responses to that question, but there's one thing I hear 100%, and they said it was just so nice to unplug. Right. And so, because I encourage people to do that, turn off the phones, turn off the emails, social media. We don't have, and that's something I learned from Ray. He actually taught me, he said, the more primitive you can get, the better. Because initially I was thinking I was going to do it at a retreat center but people would have a hotel room, and I think that would work. I've been to experiences like that, but he said, the more primitive you can get, the better. And I think that's what I hear first and foremost, is that just unplugging from life for a weekend, 2.5 days, did something to my system, right? And so being able to do that was one side of the coin in terms of what I experienced in this healing retreat. The second thing which is also why therapy works, I think, is something called attention restoration theory. And basically what that is all these skills I'm teaching people in the retreat that you'll learn in any coaching experience or therapy experience, like learning mindfulness, meditation, all these things, right? Those are some basic building blocks. What happens in life is people try to do that and they can't, because their mind is so distracted. So what therapy provides us with, this is so interesting. It gives us enough stimuli to focus on, because our minds, when we turn off the phones, our minds are still going, right? It takes a while for that to just sort of slow down. And so our minds need something for us to focus on that's not the things we've been focusing on. And that's where nature comes in. The trees, the water, the birds, right? It's not totally silent. It gives us something to do so we can do all the work, right? And so that's that's something else I hear from them in terms of their experiencing. And the other thing I hear a lot is they are connecting with other people who have been through what they've been through. Like I said earlier, the two things with depression is one of them. They're the only ones going through it. And this is something they can't talk about. We talked about family the relationships. People, the veterans especially, I don't think they can talk about any of this with anyone else, any of their other relationships. And unfortunately, even some people in their community where you feel like talking about it, somebody's going to try to fix you or say you're weak or something like that. But we create an atmosphere here that, hey, you will not be judged. You can be yourself here. So, that's something else I hear is like, I can come in here and lay it all out. I'm not going to leave. And I don't think healing is not a one-time event. It's not something that's just going to happen and you're going to be fixed. It's an ongoing thing. But this is like, I've opened that door, something I wasn't able to do. And I did it at this retreat because of those things I named. And that's what I hear. So there's a lot of, beginning steps around healing that happens here. And there's a lot of community building that happens, but also continues to happen even long after the retreat.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yes. We just have a few minutes left, and I'd like to give you the opportunity to address veterans who are listening. What would you share with them that's of value about what you've learned during your therapy sessions with clients, during these retreats, during your readings and research, that would be helpful to them? Be it a small step that they can take, a great step that they need to be considering. What would you invite them to consider or think about?
Well, I would invite them to think about, number one, it takes a village. You can't do this alone. And anything, veterans, therapy, family. I mean, we have 2 kids, 2 little boys. Trust me, it takes a village. And we use that village. And I think, we all have different roles in that village. Something in my retreats we do, everybody has a different role. The staff that comes back to help, everybody has a role. And I encourage people to find out what that is, find out your purpose and run that race, right? Don't run someone else's race. Ultimately that's kind of is something. Purpose is going to give us so much more, but that seems like a big goal. It seems like sometimes we can't even think about that. So, the first step is to just make the call, reach out for help and understand. And unfortunately, I've seen this before so many times. Getting help is not the easiest thing to do. When a veteran finally decides that they're going to reach out to help, I think they're met with a lot of roadblocks, between, them not being able to get their benefits. Them not being able to find a therapist who has an opening, them not being able to find a therapist who takes their insurance. I was recently thinking about this. I got a plane ticket, probably paid about $1,000 for it, and something happened. I needed to get a refund, and I picked up the phone because I was eligible for the refund. And I must have stayed on the phone for 20 minutes going back and forth to different people. And finally, when I finally got someone, I had to do another step to get it. And I finally said, this is not even worth it. I'm just going to give up. And I know that's a crazy analogy, but I think that's what happens when people reach out to help. It's like, I don't want to ask for help, but I'm going to. And finally, when I do, unfortunately, it's not always as easy as we want it to be. So I want to encourage people to get support, find support. Healing is an inside job, right? Healing is an inside job. That's for you to find out. That's for you to discover. People get it in nature. People get it in therapy. People get it in coaching. People get it in church, their faith. There's a number of ways that we can get this. And it's not a one-stop thing. There's so many layers to the onion that we just got to start peeling it. But remember that the first step is knowing that you can do it, and the second step is reaching out for help, and don't give up. I promise you, there's help and there's hope out there.
Thank you, thank you. What would you tell a relative, a family member of a veteran? What should they take away from this episode?
Yeah, so I would say kind of the same thing. I would say, it's what you were saying earlier about how to be a good therapist. And I'm thinking I need a therapist myself. And I would tell the family to do the same thing. If you're listening to this and you're a family member of veterans, there's help. I think you need to talk to someone, just to, because who do you go to? Who does a spouse go to talk about what's going on and the burdens? We talk about veterans carrying burdens. Family members carry huge burdens around their loved ones getting deployed, whether you're a spouse or a parent or a child. So I think, hey, you can get support too, and that's okay. Don't be afraid to do that.
Thank you, Beau. And I would like to thank our listeners and friends for joining this very insightful conversation with Beau. First, I would be remiss not to thank those service members listening or not listening for their service and sacrifice. What this episode perhaps is showing us is that suffering after being in theater of combat is not a sign of weakness or failure. It is a natural human response to trauma, giving permission to emotional and physical defenses to take hold of our own system, which at times is difficult to undo, especially if the physical effects are severe, as you told us, Beau, and stay with us. Perhaps achieving or regaining balance, stability, and peace of mind is not the same as having to fix what we think is broken within us, because maybe nothing actually is broken. It's just our impression. There may be physiological injury that is hard to treat or fully repair. What we might need regardless is to shift our perspective, rediscover our inner capacity, and allow others to support us. For military veterans and for all of us seeking to transcend trauma, healing does not necessarily mean forgetting what occurred. Rather, it is about learning to live with the experience, it seems to me, without giving all control and undue power to that experience. The threat and reality of war can shape us in unimaginable ways. The story, I believe, does not end there, though, and I hope it won't end there. With a bit of compassion toward ourselves, accepting that there is a path toward healing, which is at times challenging to find in the dark, yet we need to keep looking for it with the help of a support community and building our patience muscle. Patience and endurance, that is. Healing is a journey, like you told us, Beau. I send warm well wishes to those of you on that journey or looking to embark on it. I also believe that a little fortitude and a little ounce of hope can go a long way. And speaking of hope, Beau, having been in the therapy room or in nature with many veterans, what gives you hope and resilience at this moment?
What gives me hope in this moment is when I think about the people that I have helped and the changes they made in their life. When I got a knock on my door one day from a veteran that went through our program, and I opened the door and I looked at him and he was crying. He had tears in his eyes, and he said, I just wanted to thank you. He said, I was having a rough night the other night, and if it wouldn't be for your program, I don't know where I'd be right now. I had somebody to call, to pick up the phone, and because of them, I'm still here right now. And I think about how those things happen, they can happen, and they'll continue to happen. And that gives me hope to keep going another day.
Beau, thank you so very much.
Thank you, Tufik.
Thanks for listening. Facing the Moment is an independent production of the Foundation for Self-Leadership, a nonprofit committed to bringing emotional, relational, and societal healing and well-being to a world in need. Learn more at foundationifs.org. You can download this and all other episodes on Apple Music, Spotify, and YouTube. Until the next episode, may we all keep facing the moment with grit and grace.